You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we've got some pretty shocking news here as it relates to Donald Trump's impending sentencing in New York, which I think we all believed was just a done deal, not going to happen given his election in November. What's the update here as far as that sentencing is concerned?
Yeah, District Attorney Alvin Bragg has said no way in hell Judge Merchan should dismiss Donald Trump's 34 guilty verdicts. Instead, what he's saying is that, look, first of all, Donald Trump ain't president. He's president-elect. And guess what? There's no such thing as president-elect immunity, so let's just keep moving forward. But then he said, listen, even after Donald Trump is sworn in, inaugurated on January 20th, if he hasn't been sentenced by then, let's put the case on pause and let's simply revive it and let Donald Trump be sentenced when his temporary presidential immunity expires and he leaves office. And that, Brian, in an 82-page court filing is actually lawful, it is practical, and perhaps most importantly, it honors the jury's guilty verdicts 34 times over of Donald Trump committing felony crimes in violation of the laws of New York to try to cheat in and steal a presidential election, the 2016 election, at a time when Donald Trump wasn't president, so he has no presidential immunity for those crimes. So this is District Attorney Bragg saying, you know what, I will not obey in advance. We're going to continue to try to push this case, even if it's not realistic that Donald Trump will be sentenced before he leaves office. He should be sentenced immediately upon leaving office.
Now, Glenn, who's going to be the final arbiter in terms of whether this is accepted or
Final
not?
is a tricky word. Judge Merchan will be the first one to rule on this. This is something that was just filed by Alvin Bragg, so I suspect we'll see a ruling in the coming days or perhaps in the next week. And then it will likely be appealed up the state court appellate chain in New York. And Donald Trump may also try to file some emergency petition for review. Where? In the United States
US
Supreme Court, where, of course, he has those 6 radical right-wing ideologue justices eating out of the palm of his hand, as evidenced by other rulings that they've handed down in his favor that, frankly, are not supported in the Constitution. So I suspect we will see a race to the appellate courthouse, both state and federal.
And I don't want to be Pollyanna about this. I want to try to give our viewers a realistic expectation of what they should presume will happen here. But what do you think will happen? Do you think that there is any likelihood that Alvin Bragg will get his way, that this case will be frozen, and that we could actually see it resurrected after Donald Trump leaves office in 2029?
You know, likelihood may not be the word I would use. I would say there's a realistic possibility that Judge Merchan will rule, I'm not just going to throw out guilty verdicts entered by a unanimous jury. You know, it's funny because Donald Trump's lawyers make these complaints that this would be offensive to the democratic process because the people just elected Donald Trump to be their leader.
Right,
Actually,
but being elected to office is not some get out of jail free card for criminal convictions.
Exactly, and the only Democratic vote that matters in a criminal case is the unanimous 12-jury guilty verdict vote 34 times over. You want to argue honoring any democratic process? That's the one that you need to honor. So I don't think Judge Merchan dismisses the case. What if he wanted to wrap this case up? And this is actually something DA Bragg discusses, later on in his 82-page court filing. He said, there's nothing that says Judge Merchan must or even will sentence Donald Trump to a period of incarceration. I think he should, if this whole endeavor is to mean anything and deter anybody else from committing the kind of crimes Donald Trump committed. There needs to be a prison term, and that would, of course, happen after Donald Trump left office. But DA Bragg concedes, look, the judge could just sentence him right now to basically probation with no conditions of probation. What does that mean? Ordinarily, when a judge sentences somebody to probation, here's what that will look like. The judge might say, for example, I will have you check in with your probation officer once a month. I will have you, have to go through anger management counseling or drug treatment or alcohol treatment if you need it. I will require you to get a job or seek employment. There are all kinds of conditions, or I can require you to pay a fine. All kinds of conditions that a judge can place on a probationer when that person is sentenced to a period of probation. Judge Merchan could say, I'm sentencing you to 1 week probation, or I'm sentencing you to probation for a year, but there are no responsibilities for you to comply with your term of probation. But what that does, Brian, is it finalizes and solidifies for all time that Donald Trump is now a completely convicted felon, because you're not considered to be convicted until you have been sentenced. That is when the criminal case is finalized. So there are a number of other options. I don't like the one that gives Donald Trump a probationary pass for all of his crimes, because it doesn't feel like that's true accountability, but it is one of the possibilities that DA Bragg floated in his new court filing.
Glenn, how is it not completely illegal and antithetical to the very foundation of our justice system that Donald Trump could be awaiting sentencing on 34 convictions and just have them wiped away because of something that, to our earlier point, has no bearing on the justice system? Being elected to office doesn't mean that you're not subject to the laws of the country. So how, again, is it not completely illegal just to not face accountability for what you've already been convicted of?
This is a great question, and it's something of a philosophical question, and I'll tell you why that is in a moment. Because the question is, would it be illegal for Judge Merchan to dismiss 34 guilty verdicts properly entered by a jury? Would that violate some law? And here is where I think the philosophical question part comes in. Judges ordinarily have leeway to dismiss a case, quote, in the interests of justice. That is kind of a very ill-defined catch-all. And usually when that gets used or it gets invoked by judges, Brian, it's when prosecutors or police have engaged in some kind of misconduct. And the judge says, you know what? That misconduct standing alone may not result to the extreme prejudice of the defendant who was the victim of that misconduct. However, I, as the presiding judge, believe in the interests of justice, I need to send a message that this will not be tolerated, and I am dismissing the case. Now, let's play this out to its logical conclusion. There's no way you can say it's in the interests of justice to give Donald Trump a pass for the 34 felony convictions that a jury found that he committed those crimes so he could try to cheat in an American election. I don't think you can twist that phrase, in the interests of justice, to justify dismissing those guilty verdicts. But it doesn't mean the judge would be acting unlawfully. It means he might be abusing his discretion, because in no, fact-based view of where we are, could this be considered an in the interests of justice dismissal? So it's a little bit of a semantics game. Would that be unlawful? Well, it would certainly, in my opinion, give full-throated support to the claim it's an abuse of discretion if the judge dismisses this case, finding that the interests of justice require a dismissal.
And let's finish off with this. When do we expect Judge Merchan, who is the first person in what I can only assume will be a lengthy appeals process, when at least do we expect Judge Merchan to make his ruling on this issue?
Well, January 20th is fast approaching. I have a feeling, I don't know if he'll set it for oral argument, but now that both sides have filed their briefs, both Trump's lawyers and DA Bragg's prosecutors, I'm not sure if Judge Merchan is going to give Trump's lawyers an opportunity to file a reply brief. Sometimes judges do that. Or if the issue has now been fully briefed. If it has been fully briefed, I would think we could see some ruling by Judge Merchan in a matter of days or perhaps a week, but there is no set date for a ruling as of yet.
Okay, well, for those who are watching right now, as soon as we have any update on this case, on this decision, we'll bring it to you. So if you're watching and you want to stay on top of everything that happens, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.